Hey guys, Chop It On here. It's Wednesday afternoon. We're getting set for the main slate, MLB DFS. Made easy. Brought to you by the one, the only, DFSArmy.com. One-stop shopping. All things daily fantasy sports. Top to bottom, NBA, MLB, PGA, doesn't matter. We've got it all. We've got it covered with cheat sheets, tools, and everything. So go into the little comment section or the description. Click the link, become a VIP today. Of course, it's what I always tell you to do. Use the coupon code CHOP, like, subscribe to the video, turn your notifications on, all of that beautiful stuff. But really what I want to tell you today is I really don't know how enthusiastic I'm going to be in terms of I'm going to be trying to concentrate as I talk to you about setting up this slate for some things that I've discovered through the industry and through back testing over the past couple of weeks. And the first thing we've figured out is how to build pretty quality chalk lineups with zero research whatsoever. And you're just using ownerships. We talked a little bit this morning in the MLB channels about maybe where the state of the game is going and how cash games have evolved and they're harder now than they used to be because, people aren't dumb anymore and they're not putting together moronic lineups anymore. So when everybody's a little bit smarter and the competition's a little bit tougher, it gets harder. Yes. Somebody's always going to have an edge. There are always going to be brilliant minds out there that always have the advantage. But that's not everybody. In fact, it's documented 80% of Draftkings users are long-term net negative players as it is. So it's a very, very small number. And as the bottom of the field gets smarter and smarter and smarter, it keeps taking those that were profitable and turns them into marginal players. When that happens to you, of course, your variance gets greater. Your bankroll needs to be larger to play at the same levels you were used to playing. Your losing streaks get longer. You get frustrated. A lot of times people start taking risky plays or start taking dumb plays, and they really and truly start making fundamentally unsound decisions going forward. And that's just not really long-term viable either. It's kind of compounding on itself. It's, like getting ticked off and at your remote control and then throwing your remote control on the ground and smashing it into pieces. It's not really that productive. But we have found a way to produce good, solid, zero research cash quality lineups. And the easiest way to do that is to use ownerships. If I make about 10 lineups here and a couple of uniques and a little bit of randomness, what I'm doing on the DFS Army tools is I'm going to key in on these ownership projections right here and try to use them as points the best I can. And by doing that, as we've used on the chalkboard and other tools, by doing that, I can just let the machine build the number. Now, it's going to build based off of projections, so that's why I shuffle them up a little bit. I'm trying to get it to where I fool this projection into giving me this number here instead. And it just takes a little bit of shaking in the Yahtzee cup to pull that off. But the first thing I'm going to do is, generally speaking, about 200 minimum projected ownership gets me the chalk. I want to see, can I build 10 lineups that way with just a couple of unique players, no stacking, no nothing, no eliminating players like we had been doing, because this little slider here is absolutely a great way to pull this off. Once these 10 lineups generate, if I got them easily enough, I sort by percentage ownership, 207, comfortably up over that number. Let's try going up even more. Let's try going up to 240. And let's see if that generates lineups, all 10 lineups relatively easily. If it does, then we can go even a little bit higher. And we're just coming up from the bottom, pushing it to a chalkier and chalkier and chalkier lineup, forcing the optimizer to sort of forego projections and use the ownership projections. So there's a 245, so let's go even higher. Let's go up to, say, 260 and see if we can pull it off. You're starting to get up there in a pretty big number. Now, these are GPP numbers. Uh-oh, can't do it. So I've got to come back down to, say, 250 and do that and see if that pulls it off. So, again, I'm foregoing these projections and I'm forcing the ownerships. 7 teams are built. So really and truly, once it stops me, I'm kind of at the top end of this build. 253, 255, you might get whatever. You're probably not going to get a 260 unless 2 hours from now the projections change, in which case run it again and see if you can get it again. So the reason why I say that is I believe that if you build the chalkiest lineup possible on every single slate, and you're correct because the ownership projections are quality ownership projections, not just guesses. They're actually pretty good. That's, the projections, optimizers are only as good as the information you feed them anyway, whether it's projections or ownership projections or any of it. So if I am assuming that these are about as accurate as I can get anywhere in the industry, then I should be landing on the chalk fairly often. Now, again, these are GPP projections, so where it says 44% for Marquez, he might be 60, 70% owned tonight. I don't really know. That number is going to change, but whatever we're using, right, should be pretty consistent. If it's a high chalk player in a GPP, it's probably a high chalk player in cash. It just may be more so in cash games because it's more correct. And people fade, chalky players in GPPs, but not everybody does. As long as we've got casual players in the industry, not everybody does. So this 253, in my opinion, is pretty ideal. You may scan that lineup and say, let's make sure it's not stacked, right? Okay, so it's got 2 Yankees and then nobody else in it. You will find some lineups that have, well, there's 4 Yankees. See, like I might skip that. If that was a higher percentage than that previous one I just showed you, I might skip it and say 4 is too many for me. I'm going to come down a little bit more until I find one that doesn't have 4 in it. And there's 3 Braves, right? The bottom line is these are all using very highly owned players. All of these lineups are relatively viable. In terms of a zero research approach, you can use our chalkboard, you can use our cheat sheets to lock players in and then build this way. Whatever it is that you're wanting to do, try and build the highest ownership lineup you can for a cash game. Then, my contention is that if you do that all year long, you're going to be profitable. You're very, very hard to beat at worst, and you're a profitable player at best. However, we know that to win GPPs, we need some leverage. So by needing a little bit of leverage or a little bit of lower ownership, we might take a switch and we might come off of the Braves and pick up a different stack, or we might come off of Marquez and pick up a different pitcher, or whatever the case may be. We only need to make a subtle swap. If you want to play 3-man, 5-man, 10-man leagues, 20-man leagues, 100-man leagues, those types of contests, you probably only need to make a very subtle swap. If you were playing some 49-man entry, $12 single entry on Fanduel, you can chalk it up because, again, first place out of 49 people, really and truly, you only need to build a 1 divided by 49 percentage chance, top percentage score in the industry, right? And that's a top 2% lineup effectively. What that 1 divided by 49 is 2%. What that means is as long as I can build a lineup that hits the top 2% in the industry, whether it's the Nichols or a 100-man 50-50 or whatever the hell it is, if I'm building top 2% lineups, if I'm capable of doing that, I'm capable of winning that 49-person GPP. I may run into somebody who beats me. I may not. I saw a guy last night, who was at Turtle out on Roto Grinders, won $300,000, and he built a very strong lineup that won the 740-man tournament he was in. It won the 300-man tournament he was in, obviously, but it did not win the 15,700-person tournament that he was in. Whatever it was, quarters or what mini-max or whatever, did not win that. Why not? Because when to beat like 19,000, 15,000, 19,000 people, there were still 10 people. He only made 11th place. There were still 10 people that beat him. Those 10 people would have also won the other tournaments he was in. He was just in a higher buy-in, smaller entry tournament where you can play a little bit chalkier and you can still win with lower scores because it just doesn't take the nutted lineup to win those tournaments. Of course, the nutted lineup will win those tournaments, but you won't find it in there as often because it doesn't have to beat that many people. So if I only need to produce a top 2% or a top 1% or a top half of 1% lineup, then I can get a little bit off the chalk, say, 10 to 20%. So what, 25 points? Something like that, maybe 40 points off the chalk. I can come down to a 210 lineup. These are all 250s because that was the minimum. But let's say I wanted to build back down to 210. What that's going to do is it's going to create a lineup that's not using quite as high owned players as that other lineup was forced to. So it's going to come off of the chalk in a few key places. And that little slight smidge off the chalk in a few key places is what's going to make the difference. See, now granted, it's not stacked. You can still stack these and you can do this. So what I would end up doing, see, this is fine for 10-man league. Run it out there, man. It's going to be close. 3-man leagues, it's not stacked. It's got a high floor. It's got a lot of chalk in it. It's okay. If I come up here though, and let's say I want to build 50 lineups this time, cut it down to 1 unique player. Since I have my target number here, right, 210. Let's call it 200 even. Let's come down a little bit more and say we could play. The lower that number gets, the more viable those lineups will be in bigger GPPs. I'm not saying you know, a 220% owned lineup in a GPP can win it no matter what the size of it is, but a 125 is probably a little too under-owned. It doesn't have enough of a foundation of chalk in it to do a lot of damage in the smaller contest type stuff, the cash game, the hybrid, the 10-man league, 100-man league type stuff. Those can be won with pretty chalky lineups, whereas it might be needed to win 119,000 people nickels, okay, or even lower. That's where you get really freaky. You don't need to get so freaky in these other smaller contests. That's a very, very key concept. Kick that off to tournament mode, 50 lineups. Let's jack that percentage all the way up to, say, 33%. Let's go ahead and get really funky, and let's allow a couple hitters against our pitcher, just for kicks, right? I may come down here to the pitchers. I may uncheck them all, and I may check back only the chalk. I like playing chalk pitchers. I believe they're the best options on the slate. Most of the time, paddock, maybe down to like a minor. That might be about all I play. Everybody else I'm going to probably leave alone. If I wanted to force 2 or 3 different pitchers in my lineup, I'd put like a 40 or 50% max on DK, and that's going to make them choose. It's going to run out of eligibility, so it's going to force them to pick other pitchers up and other players as well. But now what I might do in this team stacking situation is cut down to where on a big enough slate, I'm only using the 5 stack players formations, right? And I'm going to come over to like our leverage stack tool here in the MLB channels at DFS Army. And these projections are going to change throughout the day as lineups confirm and whatnot. But as of right now, New York is the chalk. Washington, Mets, I mean, all of these guys. So I might go back and check these. What I might do is uncheck Milwaukee, Houston, Colorado. So if I come down here to my big stack size, right, and I uncheck Milwaukee, Houston, Colorado, if I can find these guys correctly, and then I come back up, because what have I got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12, 18 teams. So if I chop, let's say I want to cast a net of 10 stacks tonight, and I'm cutting out the lowest owned stacks. That'd be Toronto, Kansas City, and Cincinnati. Cincinnati, Kansas City, Toronto. Now I'm down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I need to find 2 more. Probably Dodgers, Tampa Bay Rays. Nope, Rays and Diamondbacks look like the ones. So Rays, you're gone. Diamondbacks, you're gone. What I'm dealt with here is the 10 highest owned stacks. Okay? And that's going to allow me to build these lineups. Now, if I want to, I can take the top chalk, the Yankees or whatever, and fade them completely, right? Turn them off. Turn the Diamondbacks back on, whatever. If I want to cast a net of 10, it doesn't matter if it's 1 through 10, 2 through 11, 3 through 12, 4 through 13. It doesn't matter where you cast that net. If you want to cast a net of 3 teams, 5 teams, 15 teams, that's up to you, okay? But I'm casting a net of 10 teams. Over here on the other side, I'm going to probably do very, very similar stuff, where I'm going to get rid of a lot of those lower owned teams, and I'm going to take chances on the chalk. If I'm playing smaller GPPs, then I can take chances on the chalk. Of these 10 teams, by changing that to a max of 30%, it's going to force the top 4 teams to rotate in and out. Now, I might end up with 5 or 6. I might end up with whatever. Okay? But now I can set my stacks accordingly. I can put weights on these stacks. You know, I can, and I like to put tiers on. Let's say I start off with a max of 25%. And let's say that I want, you know, and the determination is going to come by this tool right here. And I'm going to run out of time on this video today. I may come back and do a part 2 for you and just slap it in the article, because this might actually be helping somebody out there. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's cut this off right now. Let's come back. Let's set this up with weights, show you how we might choose our preferred stacks, give them a little bit more pop, and then maybe run a couple of lineups and see where we go from there. That might help. All right? Hang on, guys. And again, go visit dfsarmy.com. That's where you're going to learn this stuff in even more detail than I go through out here on the web, okay? I can sit and talk to you one-on-one in small groups, whatever, and we can really hammer these things out and teach you how to use these tools to accomplish whatever goals you want as the player, cash game, tournament player, whatever. But you got to like and subscribe to the video. You got to give me some feedback and tell me that this stuff helps, or else it just becomes a big waste of time. So hopefully that works for you guys. Come back, part 2. We'll do that here in a second.